Growing up on our small 6-acre farm in Washington was wonderful. As a child, I enjoyed many hours and days of leisure. This was back in the day before the information age. There was one phone connected to a wall and 5 channels on the TV, and I was the remote control. I had a pogo stick, a skateboard, a bike, and a horse. What else could a kid need? One of my favorite memories was rolling down a small hill in our front yard. It was probably only about a 4-foot incline, but for a young one like me, it was a delight. I spent hours lying in the grass, watching butterflies and bees, and looking up at the tall pine branches hanging overhead, or simply watching the sky. Today, we're going to think about enjoying the little and sometimes unexpected aspects of life. I'm Jem Fadling, and it's time for I Can Do That. Before we continue, would you do me a favor and share this episode or this podcast with a friend? I'd love to be able to encourage more women, and who better to encourage than the women in your own life? It also helps if you rate and review this podcast. These are little moves, and they help podcasts like mine to be found and to grow. Thanks so much for your help. Back to childhood summers with Jem. I remember being enamored by dandelions and a small purple flower that produced sweet nectar. The childlike thrill of blowing on a white and fluffy dandelion and watching the floating pappus. The delight of enjoying the sweetness of a tiny purple blossom. Both of these flowers were weeds, but I didn't know and I didn't care. I still thought they were beautiful. Recently, as this memory floated through my mind, a thought emerged. Who decides what qualifies as a flower and what constitutes a weed? Now, I know the gardeners among you know the difference and could share with me quite plainly the definitions, but bear with me, a non-gardener semi-philosopher, for just a moment. Like the dandelion bristles in the wind, let's float the question in reference to the garden of our souls. How will you decide what is a weed and what is a flower in your own life? What makes a dandelion any less desirable than a tulip? Well, it's all about our perspective, the choices we make. Every flower or weed is beautiful in its own way. And if one kind of flower happens to pop up where we didn't plant it, is it possible that it's a gift instead of a nuisance? For example, interruptions might be considered the weeds of our lives, but Henry Nouwen in his book Reaching Out said this about interruptions. What if our interruptions are in fact our opportunities? If they are challenges to an inner response by which growth takes place and through which we come to the fullness of being. Nouwen goes so far as to say that interruptions, or weeds, might actually lead to a fullness of being. I think this might be about our move to judge too quickly what crosses our path. It's easy to belittle something or cast aspersions when it might just be something beautiful or even necessary. Of course, it's easier to admire a rose in full bloom than a small yellow flower that we trample underfoot. There are no dandelion gardens to rival the likes of the Huntington Library Rose Garden in spring. But what about the little way of love? What if we could find childlike delight in the small things and even the interruptions of our lives? Maybe the invitation is to not name something a nuisance prematurely. What if we could see something beautiful and essential within? This might allow us to receive more encounters as gifts to be received rather than intrusions to muddle through. So I'll ask it again. How will you decide what is a weed and what is a flower in your own life? This is definitely something to ponder as you move into your week. So, here's your I Can Do That for this week. What is one current weed-like situation in your life right now? See if you can find any redeeming aspects within it that might lead to a more fullness of being. What would it look like to embrace this dynamic with delight, enjoying its smallness? Ask God to show you how to change your perspective on the weeds in your life. And remember, You're making your way forward one small, simple, and gracious step at a time.